A more serious COVID-19 mutated strain 10 times more contagious? The worst possible news that could break out in the middle of a pandemic is to hear that the virus that's causing it has mutated. And guess what? That's exactly what happened to the coronavirus. Recent news of the discovery of several new and more infectious strains have millions across the world worried about the possibility of catching COVID-19 for a second time, while the rest of the world is worried about the real possibility of a vaccine that may never come. Will the coronavirus become the new seasonal pandemic to hit us year after year while we can't do anything to stop it? Will the vaccines under development be effective against new strains of the virus, if they ever roll out at all? We'll uncover the answers to these questions and more in today's video, as we explore the dangers of a rapidly mutating and evolving killer virus. But first, please support our channel by giving us a like and subscribing for more videos. So, why do viruses mutate? To understand the science behind mutations and virus strains, let's talk about how viruses work. Viruses are strands of genetic material and proteins that contain instructions to replicate. When a virus infects a cell, it hijacks the cell's DNA or RNA replication machinery and uses it to make copies of itself, ultimately destroying the host cell and spreading all the copies into the bloodstream to infect new cells. Sometimes, due to insufficient proofreading by the virus's enzymes, this replication process can make mistakes, much like misspelling a word when transcribing a text for a homework assignment. Each mistake in the replication process is a mutation, and the new virus is, therefore, a mutant. Mutations are common to all forms of life, but in viruses they are much more frequent because their proofreading machines aren't as effective as those of other more complex organisms. What are virus strains? Biologists generally consider any new mutant of an organism a strain. However, most virologists only consider a mutant virus to be a new strain when it shows different virulent or infectious behavior to its predecessor. So, a new strain virus is a virus with enough mutations to make it behave differently from the previous generation. Most mutations usually don't make a big difference, and the mutant virus is practically identical to its parent in the way it infects, replicates, and transmits to other hosts. These are known as neutral mutations and don't lead to new strains. Other mutations render less active virus particles that lead to virus strains that ultimately disappear due to natural selection. However, some mutations enhance the new virus's ability to infect new cells, to replicate faster inside the host organism, or to pass down from one individual to the next, therefore becoming more contagious. These mutations give rise to new, more dangerous virus strains. This is when things start to get serious, and is exactly what's happening right now with the coronavirus. Keep watching to learn about the new strains of this virus that are popping up around the world, and just how worried we should be. Is there a new, more contagious strain of coronavirus? Ever since the pandemic started, scientists have been keeping tabs on the genome of coronavirus. There are already more than 200 recurrent genetic mutations that have popped up, but almost all of them have been neutral. This could lead us to believe that mutations, in principle, are not something to be afraid of, since most mutations don't make the virus any more or less dangerous to us. However, there is at least one mutant strain of coronavirus that is far more contagious, and that has been around since the beginning of March. This particular strain only has one noticeable difference with the original coronavirus from Wuhan, China. The amino acid number 614 from the spike proteins that give these viruses their characteristic medieval morning star shape changed from aspartic acid, codename D, to glycine, codename G. This simple change apparently made these spikes better at piercing open the host cells so that the virus can infect them faster. This sharpened spike-bearing strain of coronavirus, codename SG614, is over 10 times more contagious than the original SD614 from Wuhan. And guess what? It's actually the strain that has already caused the most havoc this year. This was the strain responsible for the huge explosion of the pandemic in Europe and the US after March 1st. and it's the strain responsible for most of the 2.5 million infections in the US alone, even though the Wuhan strain got there first. The only good news here is that scientists don't believe this new strain to be more virulent or deadly, just a whole lot more contagious. But when you consider that this makes it spread faster and to a bigger number of people, even with the same fatality rate, it still means more deaths. Think about it. If 5% of those who catch the Wuhan strain ultimately die, and only 100 catch it, then only 5 people will die. But if 1,000 people catch the SG614 strain, and the same 5% of cases die, this means that 50 people will ultimately die. That's a 10-fold increase in deaths, even though the case fatality rate is exactly the same. And there is also the big problem that as more millions of people become infected with the SG614 strain, the probability of even newer strains popping up also increases dramatically. Imagine if a single new mutation on SG614 were to enhance the virus's ability to kill us, or make it harder to recognize by our immune system, or resistant to medical treatment or vaccines. Keep watching this as we uncover the danger of this hypothetical yet likely scenario. New coronavirus strains and the real risk of reinfection. There are reports coming up all over the world of COVID-19 survivors that become reinfected, and this could be due to an infection by a different strain. Although there is still no definitive, uncontroversial proof of this, there's also a little to prove otherwise. This is what we know so far. In the first place, up until now, even though there have been reinfections, no one has had the misfortune of being reinfected more than once. In other words, no one has yet contracted COVID-19 3 or more times. Secondly, the second infection tends to produce milder symptoms than the first one, meaning that the immune system is better suited to combat the virus the second time around. While this could suggest that the reinfections have so far been caused by the same strain, it could also be the case that the new strains of the virus are still similar enough to be identified and destroyed more efficiently by the immune system during the second infection, sort of like when you get your reinforcement vaccine shot. This would undoubtedly be the best case scenario. However, the second infections we've seen so far could be caused by the same strain, and we only haven't seen third infections because of the low probability of running into someone that has a different strain of the virus. You see, strains of a virus tend to be contained in a certain geographical area, at least for some time. So when we become infected, we tend to have the same strain that most around us have. Because of this, it is very improbable that we would be exposed to a second strain, let alone a third one unless we travel or come into contact with someone else who does. Even so, it is still very early to tell which is really the case, and there are hundreds of scientists working around the clock trying to get a better insight. The fact of the matter is that we don't really know if having had COVID-19 gives us immunity at all, or even how long it lasts if it does. In the meantime, there is one more immediate and pressing question in the back of all our minds. Will vaccines be effective against the new strains? We already covered how unlikely it was for a working COVID-19 vaccine to roll out in the coming months in another video. If you haven't watched it yet, the link is popping up on the top right corner. We strongly recommend that you do in order to better understand how vaccines work and how they're made. But here's the gist of it. The vaccines train our immune system to recognize pathogens as soon as they enter the body, keeping a score of heavily armed memory cells on the lookout to give out search and destroy orders when they do. The big problem with mutations and different virus strains is that they make it harder for our immune system to correctly identify the new virus. A new strain is like a virus in disguise, and it could render a vaccine completely useless. This is why we need a new flu shot every single year, because today's vaccines against the influenza virus won't protect us against the new strains that constantly pop up of the quickly mutating virus. Given the fact that we still haven't even found a working vaccine for the first strain of coronavirus, scientists are worried that by the time we do, it won't be effective against the new kid on the block. There is a potential workaround though. because there are parts of the virus that are critical and remain constant across all strains. If vaccines are specially designed to target those sites, we may just stand a chance of getting rid of this modern-day plague before it turns into a nastier version of itself every year. This is particularly important since there is a general belief that people who had COVID-19 become immune and won't catch it a second time, which makes most survivors disregard any form of protection against reinfection. Would you stop wearing a face mask and washing your hands just because you survived COVID-19 the first time? Leave your comments and join the discussion. While you're at it, please support us with a like, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell for more great videos like this one. That's it for our video about the new strain of coronavirus that is much more contagious than the first. Share this video with everyone you know, especially if you or someone you know has already been exposed to the coronavirus. You could be saving someone from having to go through it again the second time. Thanks for watching.